What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to Greenlit Gang TV. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about Montana Malik Barronette, also goes by Tana for short. I cannot wait to get into this with you guys today. This guy's story, his gang story, is just crazy. For the better part of a decade, from the early 2010s to 2017, 2018, these guys were the big players, okay, in West Baltimore. Montana Barronette is from Sandtown, Winchester, Baltimore, a notorious neighborhood in West Baltimore. I did a lot of research on this. Again, his story plays out almost like a movie. It is so fascinating. It is so interesting. The stuff these guys did is crazy. The fact they got away with it for so long is crazy. You're going to understand why they were able to get away with it for so long the more I dive into this. Welcome back to the channel. Let's roll.
Baltimore's #1 trigger puller, as they call him, is behind bars tonight. Montana Barronette is charged with murder and could have ties to 10 to 12 other homicides. Baltimore Police Commissioner Kevin Davis says Barronette was part of a subset of the BGF gang called Train to Go. Today, police were able to arrest him for the 2014 murder of Alfonso Williams on West Lafayette Street, but believe he's responsible for up to a dozen others. Barronette was a top target of the war room.
Montana Barronette has been on top of that list for a long time, and it's because of our partnerships with our local and federal prosecutors and our federal law enforcement agencies that we're standing here before you today announcing Montana Barronette's arrest. He's a bad, evil guy.
Police arrested Montana Barronette back in August and charged him with the murder of Alfonso Williams in May of 2014. Baltimore police considered him a #1 trigger puller, and detectives believe he is linked to up to a dozen other crimes in the city. He had been held at Central Booking, but corrections officers accidentally released him on Saturday at 3:40 in the morning. Barronette was indicted by the FBI, and the state dropped its charges against him, which is protocol. Booking center employees were not aware of the federal indictment, so he was let go. Federal agents took him back into custody Sunday at 6:40 p.m. in Reisterstown. 2 booking center employees have been suspended, and the department is investigating. Live in the studio, Deborah Wiener, WBAL TV 11.
Outrage and unanswered questions after a man dubbed one of the city's most dangerous by police is accidentally released from jail. The mishap has now sparked a department investigation. WJZ is live in Central Booking in East Baltimore. Rick Ritter has more on how the suspect was taken back into custody and the shocking thing he was up to just hours after he was released. Rick.
Big sources tell WJZ just hours after Montana Barronette was released from prison, he made it all the way to New York City for a primetime boxing match. Tonight, investigators are still trying to figure out how. Just hours after he was accidentally released from jail, sources tell WJZ Montana Barronette, the man linked to 12 different murders, managed to slip all the way to Brooklyn, New York. There, he watched Sandtown, Winchester native Javonta Davis fight for a boxing title.
Javonta Davis at 22 becomes the youngest champion in boxing!
Back on the streets for a full day and a half, it's a mishap that's left many outraged.
No excuses or bottom line, point blank. They shouldn't have never let him out of there.
Thought to be a member of the notorious BGF, Barronette was arrested back in August, dubbed the #1 trigger puller by Baltimore City Police.
There is only one Montana Barronette in the city, and he's now locked up.
But on Saturday morning around 3 a.m., the 21-year-old was accidentally released from Central Booking. Barronette was known to frequent the Sandtown, Winchester area. The police commissioner even went on to say that he terrorized these communities. The Department of Correctional Services says Barronette was indicted by the FBI, so the state dropped its charges, adding the employees who released him were not aware of the indictment, and the 2 have been suspended.
He's dangerous and he's scary.
This picture obtained by WJZ of Barronette at Davis's fight read comments such as, "They freed a real one and welcome home." But on Sunday, federal agents tracked him down in Reisterstown. What may have seemed short-lived to Barronette.
He ain't got nothing to lose.
In a day and a half.
In a day and a half. It don't take but 5 minutes to kill somebody.
Is inexcusable to others.
That problem won't happen again. I guarantee that won't happen again in the state of Maryland.
The Department of Correctional Services was not available for an interview today. They say their investigation continues into making sure something like this doesn't happen again. Back to you on TV Hill.
Rick, thank you. Barronette is now being held at the Chesapeake Detention Center downtown.
Mr. Barronette's crimes speak for themselves.
Montana Barronette will serve 2 life sentences for racketeering and narcotics distribution. Judge Catherine Blake said she considered the senseless gun violence, the 6 people whose lives he participated in taking, and many more lives lost by the poison Barronette and others sold. In her victim impact statement, the mother of one victim told the court Montana Barronette is the devil's child. Nobody can be that evil.
It's difficult for me, and I think it's difficult for anyone to really get inside the head of someone else to understand what their life is like and what they're thinking. But I really return back just to the evidence and what the jury found Mr. Barronette liable for. The murders of 6 people. And to have one person responsible for that much death and that much destruction in a city, I'm just very glad that justice was done and he's been removed from the community.
Barronette was a leader of the group Trained to Go, a drug distribution gang that operated in the Sandtown-Winchester area of Baltimore City. A federal jury convicted him and 7 co-defendants in October 2018. Baltimore's acting commissioner came to court for the sentencing hearing to learn more about collaboration between federal, state, and local police agencies to end the violence and get rid of the drugs.
To the residents of Baltimore, this relationship is strong, and I'm happy and pleased to join my federal partners in this fight to make sure that we make Baltimore a safe city. It was very important for me to be here to see the hard work that's being done, that's often sometimes overlooked and understated.
Now, Barronette apologized to one victim's family, saying the victim was a good friend, and a relative, his sister, Barronette's sister, spoke up, and she described his life growing up that included going to church, and she said that he is not an animal. Reporting live from downtown Baltimore, Barry Sims, WBAL-TV 11 News.
All right, guys, we're going to jump right back into it here. We are covering Montana Barronette. He was born in 1995 in Sandtown, Winchester, West Baltimore, a notorious city in Baltimore, Maryland. Crime-ridden, gangs, drugs, violence. It's all there. And Montana Barronette's life, unfortunately, was greatly affected by that. Mother and father were really not around. From what I read, it said his father was exiled to Jamaica. Wish I could have found more information on that. I could not. His mom was in and out of the streets, dealing with their own issues. So the kids, unfortunately, raised themselves. At a young age, as you'd expect with a childhood like that, in a rough upbringing, in a rough environment where the parents aren't around, you'd expect the kids to start getting in trouble, and that's exactly what started happening. Montana Barronette and his half-brother Terrell started running the streets. At age 9, Montana Barronette's arrested for stealing a car, okay? Not long after, him and his brother Terrell start running heroin for a local dealer named David Robinson. Heroin was called Get Right. And for those of you that don't know, a lot of heroin dealers, going back to if anybody ever saw the movie American Gangster with Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe, portraying the famous dealer Frank Lucas. Okay, his stuff was called Blue Magic. Like I said, a lot of these dope dealers will name their product. If it's good, they hope that the name and the quality of the product will stand out. The gentleman that Montana Barronette and Terrell were running for was no different, okay? It was called Get Right. They started out as hitters, okay? They basically help deliver the drugs to the pack runners who then complete the sale. And for those that don't know, the street level, street corners in the big cities, there's a chain of command. There's not just one person who does everything. There's an entire chain of command. Montana Barronette and Terrell were part of that chain of command. They were the ones, like I said, they were called hitters, delivering the drugs to the pack runners who would then complete the sale. And as time went on, they got older, they got smarter to the game. Trial by fire, man. Trial by fire, and that's exactly what Montana Barronette and his brother Terrell went through. Eventually, they started their own operation, selling heroin, cocaine, fentanyl, Xanax, marijuana, and all kinds of other pills and other narcotics. Their heroin was called True Bomb. So that was the name they gave to their product. And, they soon were able to take over the streets. Now, interestingly enough, this all kind of happens early 2010s, mid 2010s. Eventually, as you're going to see later that decade is when everything comes crashing down. But it all coincided, Montana Barronette's rise and TTG's rise all coincides with the collapse of the police force and the public's trust in the police force. Freddie Gray was from Sandtown, Winchester. Freddie Gray was the famous young man who was arrested, thrown in the back of the police wagon, and ultimately died in police custody. It was a horrible incident. It was all over the national news. Protests, riots, a complete breakdown of almost a complete civil breakdown in the city basically happened, and it was horrible, okay? And all of this happened as TTG, Montana Barronette, his brother Terrell, his crew members were on the rise. Violence goes up, police presence goes down because they're afraid to police. And sure enough, they ended up taking over these blocks. They ended up taking over this city. So what ends up happening? Murders begin happening at the hands of Montana Barronette and his crew. When he was eventually convicted, he was convicted of 7 murders. We'll get into those names. The crew was tied to a dozen or more. The first one of those was a gentleman named Alfonso Williams, a local barber. He was murdered the night of the famous Floyd Mayweather-Manny Pacquiao fight. Basically what happened was Montana Barronette is up the block selling some Percocet pills. Alfonso Williams gets off work, goes up the street, purchases some pills. He was known to buy some of the kids there snacks and stuff like that. Goes back to where he's at, hanging out. They're planning a party to watch the fight. Everybody's throwing in to rent it, hanging out with his sisters. Montana Barronette gets done doing what he's doing, coming back towards Alfonso Williams and his sisters. He turns to the sisters and starts making some disparaging comments, some disrespectful comments. They snap back at him. And he's not like violent, okay? He's not like he jumps at him or like I said, becomes threatening. Kind of makes some smart-ass comments back to him. Alfonso Williams, who was, by what I read, a pretty big guy, of course, just like anybody else, stands up for his sisters. Says, hey, man, you can't disrespect him. Gets in his face. Montana Barronette, again, he doesn't react violently. He kind of backs up, kind of slyly smiles, says, hey, man, whoa, no problems. Long story short, they actually shake hands, and Alfonso Williams invites him back to the fight party and says, we'll get drinks later, and they shake hands. Montana Barronette leaves, but unfortunately not for long. Later that night, Alfonso Williams waiting for a pizza delivery with his sister outside on the stoop. Montana Barronette approaches, shoots Alfonso Williams 9 times, killing him. His friend Gotti was also there outside. There were a lot of witnesses, and as we'd come to find out, everybody was terrified to be a witness, definitely terrified to testify, to come down to the station and identify Montana Barronette and his crew. People were not doing it. And Montana Barronette knew that. You know, he wasn't out doing this stuff. He wasn't a dumb guy. He knew that people were afraid of him and his guys. And similar in this. Now, Alfonso Williams' sisters were willing to come forward, but his friend Gotti was so scared of what would happen to him and his family. It took everything the police had to get him to cooperate at some level, just to identify him. Says that he was breaking down at the police station crying. He finally did the right thing. Or they told him was to do the right thing. Whether you guys think he did the right thing or not, that's up for you to decide. But they did end up fingering Montana Barronette. Now, interestingly enough, this is not enough to get Montana Barronette off the street, because that was not the end of the killings. You got to remember, TTG is one of the most violent street gangs to come out of Baltimore. Shootings, robberies, drug dealings, witness intimidation. And they ran this for the better part of a decade. Another famous episode, murder that happened. In 2015, a triple murder occurs. A member of the YGG gang, remember I did my first video on YGG Tay, an affiliate of Montana Barronette. Well, that gang had asked Montana Barronette to kill a gentleman by the name of Lamont Randall, a Black Guerrilla family member. Now, interestingly enough, Montana Barronette thought Lamont Randall actually had greenlit him for murder. So, needless to say, they took no issue in completing this task. July 7th, 2015, Montana Barronette and his crew take 2 vans, masked up, gloved up, weapons ready. They unload 50 shots at 900 West Fayette Street. They killed Lamont Randall, but they also killed 2 bystanders. Now, this shooting made its rounds, caught the public's attention. A high violent incident, okay? Again, nothing comes of it. There is a case getting built, but they are not taken off the streets right away. This happens. Now, it is said for good reason, just like other gang leaders, Montana Barronette was very, very paranoid about snitches or anyone that he thought was working with the police. And that, of course, led to another murder, unfortunately. A member of his own gang, Antonio Addison, who was involved in that 2015 triple murder, was said to be associating and hanging out with a gentleman who Montana Barronette and his guys basically just assumed and thought was working with the police. So they decided that because Antonio Addison was part of their crew and he was associating with this person that they thought was working with the police, that he had to be murdered. So in 2016, May 25th of 2016 to be exact, they follow Antonio Addison. He's at his grandmother's house on her porch. Him and his brother Terrell pull up, and they proceed to kill Antonio Addison on his grandmother's porch right then and there. Now, these are just a few of the more high-profile murders that I was able to read about and get more information on. Like I said, they were tied to a dozen, if not more murders, okay? This was no joke. What ends up happening is the indictment comes down in 2017. It has to play out in the court system. So things don't just move along. Things move at a very slow, a snail's pace in the court system. You see him get accidentally released. He goes to the Gervonta Davis fight. Gervonta Davis was a local celebrity from the same area that Montana Barronette and his crew were from. Goes to that, ends up coming back to Baltimore. 36 hours after he's accidentally released by the jail, he's reapprehended. Basically goes back to court. He's going in and out of court. His friends are going in and out of court. And it's, like I said, during the trial, there was a lot going on. Marshals were attacked by TTG members. Knives were found in the courtroom and in the lobby. The lobby had been vandalized. TTG had been carved into certain tables or desks. Montana Barronette was caught on the phone telling people that when the feds witnesses were to come in to testify against him and his guys, to pack the courtroom to intimidate witnesses. So what ended up happening was the marshals got it to where there was only 20 to 25 people allowed in the courtroom at one time for basically public safety. Ultimately, February 15th, at the age of 23 in 2019, he is sentenced to 2 life terms for 7 murders, racketeering. The murder, racketeering is the overall, the RICO charge, okay? 7 murders, drugs, witness intimidation. It was a 24-day trial. Now, like I said, I would have the names of those that he murdered. R.I.P. to these folks. Nobody deserves to be killed. No matter whose side you're on or who you're with, nobody deserves to be killed. They were Brian Chase, Marquez Jones, Lamont Randall, Ronald Thompson, Jacqueline Parker, Antonio Addison. Like I said, the 7th was an unknown victim. So it's just a crazy story. It plays out. The fact that they were able to have so much dominance for so long really, really does speak to the level of violence, but also the issues and the craziness that was going on in Baltimore at that time. And frankly, there was no law. It was like open season. It was almost like, just the strongest survive. So they're all locked up. They all get life or 30, 40, 50 years. That's where we're at right now. Montana Barronette's name still rings bells in the streets. he will be famous for a long, long time, long after I'm done telling this story. It was one that I'd been wanting to tell for a long time. I appreciate you guys checking it out. Please leave your comments, your questions below. Give me some suggestions. What do you want me to make my next video about? Please, I read everything. I appreciate you guys checking this out. I'll see you next time. Thank you.